Okay, good. All right. And I'll introduce our guests. I'm Dan Mortensen. I'll be the moderator for the evening here. I'm on the section committee. And Bob Smith over here is also on the committee and will be our mix master and volume audio controller. And of course, over on this side, we have the incomparable Frank Laico, who is our guest of honor tonight. And before we start talking to Frank,
Can almost hear you.
we had a little bit of a problem, and so I'm going to use a handheld instead of a headset. Sorry about that there, Bob. So what we're going to do is look at Frank's life a bit and his works. We're going to have a little conversation here with Frank, and we want it to be a conversation rather than a presentation. So we'd like to hear if you have questions or comments as we go, and Frank is happy to address that. As I said, we're recording, so when you want to say something, please go to one of these microphones and don't put your hand around the bottom of it. That seems to be interfering with its antenna for some reason. And just speak up and we'll get you on tape and get that happening. Anything else we need to say before we...
Well, no, I just want you all to know I'm very happy to be here and to give you some insight into what the New York recording industry in the good years of the 50s, 60s, 70s, when everything was happening and we were hearing music and it was fun. And I'm thrilled to be out here. This is only in this part of the world, a little over 2 years. And I just appreciate everyone that we've come to meet and know. You've all been very nice. And I'm happy to be here. And if we can make you interested in listening to what I'm saying, why, that'll be a pleasure. That's it.
Okay. All right, we're going to concentrate for the most part on on Frank's experiences in the 30th Street Studios in New York. What was the address again?
207 East 30th Street.
And that's what we're looking at now. This is the exterior of it. And why don't you tell how this came to be a recording studio?
Okay. Well, I was with CBS Records, and we were running out of space. And the largest studio we had at the time was one of CBS Radio called Liederkranz Hall. It was a delightful studio, but TV started taking over, and so they took it away from us and made two TV studios. And so we needed some facility, and I don't know how Mitch Miller and the people heard of originally about this. Was originally a Armenian church. Doesn't look like a church, but that's what it was. And so the brass went and took a look, and they got interested. And then Mitch Miller, who at the time was the head of the A&R department, which was artists and repertoire, I mean, he loved it. And then he asked a few of the engineers, myself included, to go on down with him one time after they all saw it. And I loved it, and the other guys were happy also. And so we said, yeah, it's great. So he went back to the brass and said, we'd like to have it. And Mitch then said, okay, but there's a stipulation. When we get it, we don't want it cleaned, we don't want it polished, we want CBS to stay out of it. Leave it just as is, all the dust, all the fuss, and hangers, long drapes, and awry and everything. And he said, that's the way we want it, and that's the way we did it. And until the day he passed away. Oh, no, I'm sorry. He didn't pass away. He retired. And sure enough, the following week, the studio was closed. It was clean. It was beautiful, except that we didn't have the same audio. It was so different. You wouldn't have imagined how right Mitch was at the time. And I did so much of the records and the tapes and everything, so that the first session that was scheduled, Mitch said, "You do it," so we find out what what happened. Well, I called them at home after the first day that I did it. I didn't recognize the audio. I didn't. It was so completely wrong and different, and so I complimented him on his great knowledge to know that things should be left alone when it's right. And so there we are. And there he is. I didn't realize it. He was conducting Sing Along with Mitch. Did any of you ever see that television show? Well, I did the audio for the show, and they were not singing. They were just mouthing because the tapes that I made was used for the audio. So they were a nice bunch of guys. It was fun.
All right, we'll go to the next one here. Here's a relatively poor shot of the interior, but we'll scroll through here. You can see all the curtains and stuff hanging there and so forth. Here's a better shot.
That I don't know if you all know Glenn Gould or when he was alive. He was quite a character and a marvelous pianist, but very fussy. And we never seemed to satisfy him for whatever pianos that we had. So we had Steinway send in 3 new ones, and he played with each one of them.
To pick the one for his recording that he wanted to use.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Dan, could I ask a question?
Yeah. Jeffrey, go
Hey,
ahead.
Frank. Since you came to my meeting, I decided I would come to yours.
What did he say?
Since we were at his meeting, and we should say that our September meeting
Yeah,
was a
September.
tour of Jeffrey's
Oh, okay.
recording truck, and
Oh, yes, okay.
And it-
I can't see
Because
it
the
from
lights
here.
are too
Go ahead.
bright. Hey,
that was the genesis for this meeting, was hearing Frank talk about his recordings played through Jeffrey's monitors and how magical that was to listen to you talk. So we decided to get this going. So
it
sorry
was
to
so
keep
fun, Dan, because I got to, whoever is the presenter, and you guys can aspire to this, well, Rick will take you out to dinner, right? And before the meeting. And so we got to go to dinner, and of course Dan was there, and Frank was there, and I got him to have salmon teriyaki for his first time. But at any rate, we were walking down the street, and he started telling me some stories, and I was just nearly agape. At any rate, for everyone, Frank, in the room who doesn't get what level of artist you were recording, number one, can you just mention a few of them? And number
we'll get
two,
to that.
yeah. Number two, when you first went into the studio, what were you recording on? Not wire, 2 tracks, mono, multi-track?
Oh, it was still monaural. Yeah, that was we went in there about 1950. It was still monaural, and nothing had been changed. The control room at that time was up above and in a different location altogether. And, well, we didn't have tape, so we were feeding our audio through the telephone lines up to 799 7th Avenue, where they were then recording it on, at the time, glass discs. Eventually we got into aluminum coated discs, and then of course onward to tape. So that's how it started, and it grew and it grew and became more and more famous within the industry.
So you should understand that we've put this
Oh, there it is.
presentation together for you, and we haven't done this before, so there'll be some rough edges. There are pictures of a lot of this stuff that you're asking about, but it's not necessarily in the order that it comes up, so we'll try to get to it as we can. This is showing the upper,
That was the original control room area up above there. And that lasted a couple of years. And then I built a control room on the main level.
which is this,
Yeah, that's the main level.
Mhm.
I don't see the control room.
down in the lower left here, middle left, right there. Can you see this? Can you see the arrow where I'm pointing?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
There's the
there it
control
is.
room. But a wonderful high ceilinged space.
Yes.
How big is it?
100 by 100 by 100. And it was a super, super room. Everything sounded good. It was great.
So Frank, when you first went into this studio, there were no recorders there. The audio went down the block,
Yeah, up to 52nd Street.
and you had transcription guys up there on the lays
Yeah,
that you'd talk to and say, "We're taking a track. Do it."
right.
Got it.
From Studio C did that too? Because
yeah,
Studio A did that.
Yeah,
Studio C had leased telephone lines, and
yes,
Oh.
when we first started,
Okay.
they still was still done that way.
okay.
Took us, I guess, about 2 years before we were able to do our own recording within that control room there, but we still at first had to keep feeding up to 7th Avenue. And then when the lines and everything was set up, then we started recording right in the control room.
Okay. And here's Leonard Bernstein and the Philharmonic showing how you could fit a lot of people in this space. And this was a famous space for orchestral recording.
Yeah,
You did a lot of things there.
yeah, we could hold a full symphony orchestra with chorus, soloists, whatever, and still had lots of room to walk around.
So they're all at the other end of this big room, and there's still a lot of floor space.
Yeah,
So we knew the topic of microphones would come up, and so we're going to get through that right now. We went through a bunch of pictures of microphones with Frank to identify some that they used. And so we're just going to zip through here. And feel free to talk about any of these
well,
that you want to.
there are so many microphones available, and there were 5 of us that were control then. We called control men. Now they're called something else. And we had a pick of microphones. Each one of us used whichever we wanted, and these are some of those. And we used them at different reasons, some on rhythm, some on guitars, and then the Neumann started coming in, and they were condenser microphones, quite a change, and I liked them very much. My favorite was the 49, and that's for the longest while. That's all I used on a vocal, and oftentimes on the string sections. It just did everything I wanted. Yeah. Well, you're all probably familiar with these. There's nothing to be said about them.
And now we'll see some pictures of people using these in the
Yes.
studio.
That's a 67, and that's Billie Holiday. And you see our studio speaker there, pretty large one. And
It's not an A7. It's got the horn like an A7, sort of, but voice of the theater? Yeah?
I
think that's
guess
what it
so,
Yeah.
You're asking me something I have no problem remembering.
It was just there, and you guys
I mean,
used it.
it was 50 years ago. And, But anyhow, yeah. And that Johnny Mathis, who I started, and he's still going strong. He's a hell of a good singer. And but believe it or not, I guess quite a number of you have listened to him, have some of his music. He has a very small voice. You had to stand next to him in order to hear him. So Mitch Miller said to the first session, he said, we're going to spend time and make a sound of his voice so it's going to be sellable. And that's what we did. We spent 2 hours trying all kinds of equalizers, microphones, echo, the whole bit until we hit it right. And Mitch said, that's it. Mark that information down and don't change it. And we never did. And he went very heavily into the market. People loved him. And he's still out there. I think he was 18 years old at that point. He was a runner at school.
A runner?
Yeah,
Really?
track man.
Wow.
And of course, you all recognize Benny Goodman, I'm sure. And that session, I also had Rosemary Clooney was on the date. And so that photo was taken. She was on this side of him. That's Sarah Vaughan. That's not at 30th Street. It's the studio up in the main building that we had. And it was not for Columbia, it was for, I can't remember the label, but that's the only album I ever recorded with her. And she was a nice, good singer and a nice person.
Frank, now that you mentioned recorded it, can we put a fine point on this? You were the recording engineer for these artists, so that everyone in the room knows you were the guy, right?
Oh, I thought I said that.
Yeah. I just want to.
Yeah, that's the point of this of this event. Can you talk about these baffles that you guys used? Because there's a lot of.
Well,
We'll
we
get into
used
that later.
baffles. Not all of us used them the same way, but I would use it for the vocalist, not to close him in, but just so that he could hear himself better while singing, and also he could hear the instruments. I always set the vocalist right close to the rhythm section, which was, they all loved it because they needed that. We didn't use headphones in those years, and so the closer to the orchestra, the better, and that's what we did. That was up in Studio A, and well, I really don't remember the tunes or anything, but it was done.
And we'll talk some more about the layout of the recordings as we get a little later in the performance.
You all recognize him?
Most famous man in the world,
He was Cassius Clay,
literally.
and if you all remember him, he had that expression that he was the greatest. Well, I had to do an album with him one time. I spent the whole week with him, rehearsing and everything else. And if you ever want to see a person that can eat like a horse, CBS brought in food after food. He never had enough. It was incredible. But he was a nice man. We had a lot of laughs. I never heard the record, and I never knew if it ever sold anywhere. I had a copy, and my friends always used to borrow. I would let them, but I never marked down who took what, so I never got it back. So whoever it is still has it.
So if anybody here has it, give it back, okay?
Aretha Franklin, you're all familiar with that lady. And unfortunately, when she signed with Columbia, the producer that was assigned to her was also a composer, arranger, And he, in his mind, thought she was going to be a great pop star. So she made 2 albums that went nowhere, and she left and went back to the label that first started her, and they let her do what she wanted to do. And she's still going strong, very strong. Well, yeah, that was the first cast album that was ever done in the industry, and our president, Goddard Lieberson, signed it, and then he produced it. Of course, you can't see him, but he produced it. That was the start of the many cast albums. I have also did a half dozen of them, and they were exciting to do. You had to do it in the one day, and if you went overtime, everyone got paid for a whole new session. It wasn't overtime pay, a whole new session. So of course, I would go in on Saturday and set up everything and get in early Sunday morning, about 8 o'clock in the morning, and people were streaming in. And then once we got started, there was no stop. You just kept going. And but as I say, they were exciting because it was all done live, as the expression is today, live. So that's what they did.
So in this picture, there's an orchestra behind us,
Oh yes,
behind
yeah,
where we are.
yeah,
So they're in the space
yeah,
at the same time the orchestra is.
right.
And there's no baffles around these guys.
On
and you don't-
some of them, yeah.
but not on this particular
Not-
one. This
no.
this isn't your session.
No.
This is somebody else's session.
Right.
But I wanted to show this because I happened to find this uh, picture of this recording session,
Yeah.
and also wanted to show when Mitch Miller didn't want the room changed at all. If you can see the pointer there, there's a lot of painted over stuff and just miscellaneous crap on the wall. They didn't touch it. They did the minimum amount of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
All right, we'll talk about the console in the studio now because I knew you would want to talk about that and see this. So here's a picture of you at a Tony Bennett session
Right,
with Tony over listening,
right.
and Tio Macero,
The producer.
producer. And we're going to just talk about the console now. And this is not the greatest picture, but we'll go to another
No,
one here.
but it's one of the consoles that our own maintenance department and research department put together. It started out with the first 8, and then as we finally started getting into more
Inputs?
complex sessions where we needed more microphones. And so then they added the second half to the left there. And I guess we used it for about 5 years and then maybe a little bit more. Then we got the new type faders. And
So let's talk about this one
yeah,
here
that's
first. Here's another view
right.
of that console at a Thelonious Monk session.
Yeah.
And you may have you'd worked with Thelonious.
Yes, I did.
We're not
did.
sure if on this one.
I'm
but-
not sure if I did this one either, but
Yeah.
I recorded Monk quite a number of times. I found him very interesting. He never said a word. He would just, his musicians that were there already, they're playing around, and he always walked in a little bit late, never took a hat off, never spoke to a soul, not even his musicians. And they would run things through, and he would just point, do whatever, and they played like hell. It was great,
PJ, do you want to?
very spontaneous.
So, Frank, in '63, when you're doing this, are you recording stereo now to tape, or are you mono still?
I think, no, in '63 we were in stereo, and we were in tape. We had one tape machine. We always were the last to get new material. I don't know why, but CBS never seemed to want to be first in the new pieces of equipment.
No, I think you got it before EMI did.
So here's the section of the console that's over near the producer's desk,
Yes.
and you can't really see what those knobs are labeled or
Well,
what
it's
it's
hard
for.
to view, but
Yeah.
most of it was for the producer if he wanted to. Of course, we fed it to the producer, and if he wanted to make a change to whatever section, he could just do it.
And here's the other side of it.
I think we were 24 now or 16. I can't remember.
2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16 probably
Yeah, okay.
over there.
Yeah, so as you can see, we're still with the rotors, and it's still a CBS console.
Homebrew, built by them.
And we had three meters at that point. We were going stereo and also 3-track. And no matter how many tracks I myself and the company and didn't matter if it was 24 tracks, I always listened stereo so that I knew what I was doing and it was finished that way. And the problem then, of course, I did not do the remixing. I just did the live sessions. And another engineer or two would then devote the time to remixing it down to satisfy themselves most times. So,
And let's talk about the Columbia studio process, because this was a factory, and your job was to put the music on the tracks,
yes,
and then you sent the multi-track off, and somebody else remixed
someone
it
else,
to come out with the final consumer
yeah, it was,
mix.
had a different name. It was the editing department. And all what they did then was splice all the good takes together to make a master tape, and then went down to the mastering room, and they did the mastering from that tape. And that was done on aluminum coated discs.
So when we're listening to these songs, what you're going to be hearing is somebody else's final work, deciding the piano is over here and the drums are over there or whatever. And so that's somewhere down the line in the process from where Frank was.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Not always successfully either. Here we are.
So what happened here? This is different than what it used
This
to be.
is the big one. This is 36 positions, faders, very modern. Meter for every track, and it was fun. It really was.
And we think this is the same console that was in your Jeffrey's truck, a Ghost Soundcraft. Not the same individual, but the same
We don't have a
model.
ghost.
Isn't that a Ghost?
No, it's a TS-12.
Oh, I thought it was a Ghost. Sorry. Okay.
It was similar.
Okay.
Hey Dan, did we see
Oh, yeah.
speakers?
Well,
Main speakers on that other one?
that's me enjoying myself. I was working. You wouldn't think so, but that's the way I worked. I was always laughing. Everyone thought I'm crazy. The musicians said, "How can you be so happy when you got these producers and barking orders and everything else?" I said, "I don't hear them. I just keep enjoying myself." And that those two, the fellow standing with the glasses, he was recording on the tape machine, 24 track. The other fellow was a maintenance man hanging around in case we have trouble, which we did, of course. But, it was good.
So Frank, there was a question here about these three speakers. Why are there three monitors above the console? Do you recall?
I can't figure that out. I don't know what that is up there. They don't look like the speakers that we did use.
We looked at this earlier and we thought maybe this was Studio A and not Studio C, not the 30th Street studio.
We never had that. That Studio A control room was very small.
Oh,
So
okay.
I don't know where that came from.
Okay. So there you go. So moving ahead here.
There we are.
And there we were.
Yeah,
So we'll go to outboard gear and talk about that for a minute.
sure.
Back to this same studio shot, and we'll look first at, we'll look in three places. We'll look at this rack, and this rack up here.
Yeah,
So looking over Frank's shoulder and blowing it up so that you can see some little detail there. You can see a dial and 4 little knobs across the top of this, and maybe there's another one of those down below. I put this up on the Pro SoundWeb Fletcher's forum, and Dominic identified that as RCA BA6A compressor. And Frank said, yeah, that's what it was. So that was pretty cool for him to spot that, I thought.
I use that compressor quite often, mostly on the vocalists. And I didn't use it as a limiter. I just used it as a compressor, just to catch the real loud, I guess is the word, sounds from the voice. And normally people do compress it. I didn't do it. I just limited it. I made it so that you would hear the tonality and you would understand that the excess volume didn't matter really. And I was able to put whatever level on the voice that pleased me, and also the artist and the producer most times.
So you're making it a little less wild, just clamping a little bit
Yeah,
on it.
that's another spare rack when we had to use more than we had at the console itself. And
Dominic-
we would just patch.
Dominic thought that this was a CBS homebrew mixer. You can't quite tell. There's something
Yeah,
silver here with some knobs, a patch panel, 8 knobs in a row, and then 2 knobs with 2 switches flanking
Yeah.
each knob. But what that is beyond a mixer.
I have to admit, I don't remember that. I thought maybe it might have been a different rack that before we got the big console, and used this as for the mic inputs.
Adding more inputs.
Yeah,
Yeah, okay. Little sidecar mixer, yeah. And then this rack in the back
yeah, that too. That's
with some
also,
stuff on top. This is some kind of homebrew stuff up at
I
the
don't
top there.
recall those at all.
But these guys here, Dominic picked up on that, and that's the Ampex MX10
Yeah.
mixer. So 4 inputs, stereo, it's either left or it's right or both. And that's what it looks like. So those are good pickups on his part. So now we'll listen to some playback.
That's
Or-
Johnny
and
again.
we're going to watch some people listening before we listen. But here's Johnny listening to playback in the back of the studio. And notice that there's some stuff up on the wall here, some kind of papers. This is the Dave Brubeck group listening to Take 5 in 1959, which was not a Frank session, but it's in the studio, and you can see the console and the tape machine in back, and Johnny was sitting there. And that on the above here looks like schematics
Yes, they were.
for the system.
Right.
So wouldn't that be cool to blow this up and see
Yeah,
what
we had them
how
put
that
up
was laid out?
just for us, so we know where things were going, when they were going, and also the maintenance crew had them for their uses, and it worked very nicely.
So using all the power available to us in iPhoto, we've blown this up, and now you too know what went on in that studio. And here's the other one. So it's very clear cut. There's lines and numbers.
Makes a nice picture.
Yeah, it's a nice abstract picture. So unfortunately, that idea didn't quite work out. So we got a bunch of pictures about Frank too. So let's look at that. Here's an awesome picture of Frank in
That's my
Studio A.
favorite pose.
This is not on 30th Street. This is over on 52nd.
Studio A
Studio A.
on 7th Avenue.
Yeah. So, and I mean, look at that.
That was a 6-position console.
His attitude and his ears. Two reasons why people loved
Remember
working with
that,
Frank.
Colette? That's me.
And here's some people he worked with.
That was Kitty Callan. Anybody recognize that name? No. Okay, let's go on.
Here he is in
That's
front of this
me
cool
again.
monitor.
That's Barbara, the first album that I made with her, and that's Michel Legrand, and that's when she got started. She really became a big star, and still is.
You did her first 6, was it?
First 16 albums, and I don't know how many singles, and so it was great. And there we are, Mr. and Mrs. with Tony Bennett. Tony became a very personal friend of ours. We knew his mom and his sister, and we got together quite often. We had him at our house for dinner one time, and it was just very nice. And since we're out here, we have seen him when he came and performed in Seattle and spent half hour or so after the show talking to each other and enjoying seeing each other. So, and that is Beverly Sills. She's one of America's own classical singers, if you're all familiar with her or not. She's a very nice lady, very nice.
Was it Carnegie Hall that she spearheaded
Pardon?
was it Carnegie Hall that she spearheaded getting renovated?
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah, she was an incredible force
Yeah.
for
We were doing a pop album. She wanted to try singing pop, and we made it. And again, I don't know whatever happened to it. Yeah, that's another nut. Don't know why. That's Frank Stanton, the president of CBS at the time. Looks like a gift, but I can't remember what the hell that was. And my wife doesn't remember, and I don't recall ever wearing whatever it is. So, but it looks good.
So when you hear about the Frank Stanton Studios on NPR, this is the Frank Stanton that came from. And then after you left CBS,
Yes, when I left CBS, I freelanced for 10 years, and this was my big thing for people to know how many people I recorded and who I recorded, and hopefully people would run to their phone and call me and do dates with me. Well, not too many of them did. But I did, shortly after, producer and personal friend by the name of Ward Botsford called me and said, why didn't you call me? I just found out you left CBS. I said, well, look, I wasn't happy leaving, so I said, but why are you calling? He said, I'm starting my own label called Arabesque. Originally, it was to be all classical music. And he said, I want you to be the engineer. So, of course, I said, listen, Ward, you and I are good friends. I'll be happy to it. But before we do it, you have to make a decision. If you want me, you're going to have to take it on my terms. I will not record multi-track anymore. I want to go directly two-track, stereo. I said, you'll have the better product, you'll save a lot of money, and you'll be able to pay me when I want my money. And so that's what we did. I found a studio in a college in Westchester called Concordia. It's a beautiful, beautiful room. Good size, bigger than this. And that's where we did all our recordings. And it was, except when we went on the road. We went to Massachusetts to the lady school, Wesleyan. Is that right? Yeah, recorded there. So it was,
In Princeton?
went to Princeton, yeah. Washington, D.C. We bounced around. Had a lot of fun. We did. The nice thing about being independent like that, we set the schedule to suit us, not the client or the company, so that we work usually from 10 to 4, and that was it. And we closed up. Whereas at CBS, I would go in 8 o'clock in the morning, and very many mornings I'd be coming home around 4 o'clock in the morning, sleep 2, 3 hours, drive back and go to work again. And my wife, thank God, I had her, and she was great. She raised our children because I was not home that often enough. She gave up her. She was an artist, and she gave that up to stay with the children until they went into high school, and then she went off on her own, and she's done great.
So did you really hate that, getting up at 8 in the morning and coming home at 4 and going
Did
back?
that
Was that terrible?
more often than I should have. And the reason, because I would drive in and out. Before I got the car, I would stay in a hotel, and I can't sleep in a strange bed. And I would get up and go to work, and I'm still drowsy. So I got home, I got 3 hours, 4 hours sleep, saw the kids, had breakfast with Colette, and took off again. So it was easier that way. My mind was better.
But you told me before that you loved that.
Oh, I did.
You never regretted.
Never, never. Those pictures of me smiling, those were honest smiles, I tell you. I had a lot of fun. All the musicians were my friends. That's what made it so good. I don't know how many of you have been in the industry, but musicians are the nicest people. They are so concerned for each other. You never hear a harsh word. If one makes a goof, it's okay. The next one would probably be mine, they would say, and we'd do another take. And just a nice warm atmosphere, really. Ah,
All right, let's listen to some music here.
oh, okay. That's
So the first one we'll listen to is an album and project called The Real Ambassadors. Iola Brubeck.
Iola Brubeck, Dave's wife, composed, and it's really a civil rights record, I would say. And
It's like an opera.
yeah, and she wrote it. Dave, of course, plays in his trio. And other sessions, well, the one session I did was with Carmen McRae and Louis Armstrong and a couple of other. Gene Wright was Brubeck's bass player. Joe Morello was the drummer. And they were a great trio. I'm sure you all have heard his stuff.
So the track we picked to listen to is track 13 on this CD, One Moment Worth Years. And the mix master here is going to...
Must I spend a lifetime just in waiting while others...
Most of that is room sound that you're listening.
So we're going to fade it out rather than listening to the whole thing.
It was I have to tell you, now you know I'm an old man, but I had that opportunity to record Louis Armstrong, and I really felt great. I appreciated being there, and I, fell in love with him. He was such a nice man and fun to talk with. Just things that you don't ever see and you don't understand until you're with the person himself. He was a delight.
So let's talk about the layout of how you set them up. How would you set up a session
Well,
like
it's
this?
pretty much as you're seeing it, the drums and the bass, and there's the piano. And we had Louis and Carmen together. I had them in the baffle, but not tight, open, so they had room to move around and hear each other back and forth. And I had them both on a separate mic, and they were very comfortable. Uh, it went nicely. It was great. I would have loved to have recorded him with his full band one time, but it didn't ever work.
So what we heard was with 8 microphones.
Huh?
What we listened to there was done with 8 microphones.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, right.
Yeah.
I had 4 microphones on the drums, one on Dave Brubeck, and the bass, Gene Wright, and the drummer was Joe Morello, who was blind, by the way,
Oh.
and a hell of a drummer. Unbelievable. Great.
Okay. And the next piece we'll listen to is from the album Miles Smiles by the Miles Davis Quintet. And we'll listen to track 3, Footprints, recorded in 1966, with those incredible players on it.
I don't think I have to mention Miles Davis without somebody chuckling. He was a super musician. He was a super person, but he didn't like the white race. But he and I became the best of friends. I enjoyed him so much, and we enjoyed each other, and I enjoyed recording him. And as you can see, everyone was very close to each other so that they can hear the rhythm, feel it, and also hear each other. And that was the secret to this kind of recording. And Miles was very happy with it, and I was too. I enjoyed him so much.
So talk a little more about how you place them in this huge space. Where are they? You've got a 100 by 100 foot area to put them in.
Well,
How do you decide where to put this arrangement?
well, when we first went into the studio, being so large, you just could not just go in and say, we're going to put you here. And we did that when we first went in. I experimented with quite a few groups, and the part of the room that I enjoyed and pleased me the most was right in front of the control room when the control room was down below. And the rhythm section sounded good right there. And I would talk to the musicians, and we agreed that this was the best, and that's how I set them up. Distance-wise, it's hard to draw. This artist did very well there, but that's the way I did it. And also, I like to see the musicians and see what's happening instead of not seeing it all. You do that when you go on a remote. You don't see anything. You just play it by ear. But that was a very tight sound. You heard a good bass sound.
Yeah, how did you achieve that? All of those instruments were just right present in your
I
face.
used a microphone on them.
Well,
I never
how?
enjoyed that practice of putting the microphone inside the F hole. It never sounded like a bass to me. So I used the microphone. At the time, it could have been a 44, RCA 44. Just no, just the front version, and put the mic where I thought would be the best sound. And I asked him to play. And when I was happy, I would ask him, whoever it would be, if he were happy. He said, sure, it sounds great, let's go. So we'd go. That's the way it went.
But to be a little more specific, when we were talking earlier, you said you'd put the bass mic about 10 inches out, 8 to 10
it
inches
just
out?
depended who it was.
Well,
Yeah,
yeah.
8 or 10 inches.
But not 10 feet.
Oh,
You-
no,
or-
no,
And
no,
not
no.
1 inch.
Can't get a bass sound that way.
And not 1 inch. It was
Yeah,
fairly
about
close.
3, 4, 5 inches, basically.
And how about the trumpet and the sax? Where would you put
Well,
those?
the trumpet, I used the 49, you hear that. And the sax, I think I had the 67 on him, the Neumann 67. And they were very close to each other because, as you heard, they're playing together in various parts of the song. And they were happy. They were a nice bunch.
I'd like to ask, were there any baffles on this session? And if so, where were they placed? Baffles?
Oh, well, I would have baffles, low baffles in front of the drums. And then I had the saxophone would be one behind him, but not tight back. And also Miles had a baffle behind him. And again, not tight because I wanted him to hear the rhythm section, and also Wayne Shorter on sax. He was very comfortable with it. So that's what we did. And other albums I did with him, we followed that same routine. And they very seldom had sheets. Miles would just give them, there's a word for that. Nothing really sketched out, but just suggestions. And that they would follow, they would rehearse that way, and once they were ready to go, we just start the tape and keep going until we get the good take.
Yeah, I don't recall the year of this album, but at this point, were you still not using headphones, or
No.
they're still listening just to
We
themselves?
still were doing it without headphones.
And I noticed you haven't yet seen where. Did you typically use a room mic, or was it always just close miking?
No, I didn't use a room mic because I never mic'd everything tight. I hate that sound. I want the room to be part of of the tune, and also musicians are happier that way. Once we started with headphones, their musicianship went the way of all things. They say, oh, they'll fix it in the mix. Don't worry about it, you know. Whereas if they have to do it live, I hate that word, but that's what it is. They hear each other, they play with each other. So I think that was my success anyway.
That's great. Thank you.
And how tight or how loose was, how close would a mic be to the sax, for example, or to the
Well, I
trumpet?
would say just about, well, maybe Bob here would be worth miles, and I'm aware that the sax would be. So they hear each other very nicely.
How close would the microphones be to each player, though?
Well, Miles, I always had about 3-4 inches from his horn, and Wayne just a little bit further back, and I would not have the microphone at the hole. I didn't believe in that. I have the microphone halfway up because he's also playing other things.
On the
And
saxophone?
Yeah.
All right. It's about 8:30. Do you want to take a break now? And,
I'd do anything you want. I'm not in control here.
we got, we'll take about a 10, 15, 20-minute break or so. We've got some water. And
Let
Gary, did you bring the cookies too?
Let them
You didn't bring the
relax.
cookies? Well, is there something else we can have instead of cookies? PJ, do you have something there that we can use instead of cookies? I'm sorry, we didn't. Do you have lemon drops enough to share? Mic cables. PJ has some solder? Okay. Oh, hang on a second. I think he's got something. Oh, what's this? Oh, bring it over here.
Oh,
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Frank. Happy birthday to you.
gonna help me? Thank you all. What I said earlier about you folks out here, I can double that now. Look at that. My God.
And here's a little token from all of us that we've signed to you that says something like happy birthday
Yes, it does.
to you.
From your AES friends. Okay.
It's Friday. So we thought we would jump the
Yeah.
gun a little bit. And
You knew it then before Colette mentioned it.
we have our ways.
I guess so.
And that's what the cake looks like.
Yeah.
And it's too bad we don't have any more gifts for you. I'm sorry, I wish we do. But
What?
actually,
I don't want anything.
we do have something here. Where is it?
I'm embarrassed that you all have to sit through this. I don't know what he has here.
Well, look, I think it's on that side of the paper.
Oh. Oh, you're kidding.
So in the course of our researching this, we figured out that Frank doesn't have a computer, and it's a pain in the
it's
neck
Been down for
with
so
no
long.
internet. Yeah, so you're going to get a computer from us.
Oh,
And
you fellows are incredible. We finally get back into the world. I wish you hadn't done it though.
well, but we did it anyway. So Bob will come and it's still in the mail or something. So Bob will come and set it up for you. And congratulations and thank you for sharing with us.
Where is he?
Right.
He's there. This man has been the most kind, delightful person. I also have problem with my right eye, so I can't drive. And being new out here, I wouldn't be able to anyway. And Colette has taken me to every doctor and hospital in Seattle. But this gentleman here picks me up every time to come to a meeting, takes me home. I just can't say enough for him. He is so great. And, and I don't want to slight Dan, nor any of the other fellas. Everyone has been more than kind to me. It's a great thrill to be here.
Well, it's a great thrill for us to have you here, and we appreciate you a lot. And
All
happy
right.
birthday and congratulations.
You've made it happy.
Good. Now this is the intermission. So grab some cake and some water and have a good time.
Oh, sweetheart, you did it again.